And welcome to the Farm and Home Show. This week we're going to be visiting with Dr. Paul Vincelli. He's with the University of Kentucky, Extension Plant Pathologist there. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Glad to see you.
Well, I'm glad you're here today because you're going to kind of help us unveil the science or the mystery behind GMOs.
Good. That's the idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for our viewers who might not know exactly what GMOs even are, can you explain what they are?
Well, yeah, I sure can, and I've got some displays to use. So if with your consent,
okay.
One of the things I like to do with audiences when I talk about genetic engineering or GMOs, same thing, is take a piece of an apple. Now this is a non-GMO apple.
Okay.
And so I take a bite out of it and I ask people to raise their hands if they think that I'm eating DNA.
Okay.
And yeah, exactly. You know, actually, you were right on it. You know, it didn't take you very long. And so, but you know, people were a little surprised by the question, and eventually, at least a few people raised their hand and said, "Well, yeah, you're eating DNA because every food that we eat has DNA. The apple has DNA of apple, DNA of bacteria that are on the surface, and other forms of DNA in what I've just eaten. So." DNA is not harmful, and that's a really good starting point to understand genetic engineering.
Absolutely, and there's so much DNA in apple, you know, and that's why we have guys like Paul who can understand all the things that go into that. But with GMOs, how does that DNA come into play? Right.
Okay. So this demonstration is a way to get at that. So because it's really a rather simple concept, and I think we can explain. So this is, let's imagine that this deck of cards is a plant that performs very well, a crop that performs very well in Kentucky, but it doesn't have resistance to a particular disease.
Okay.
This blue deck is a wild relative of the crop, the red crop, and it doesn't perform well in Kentucky, but it happens to have a single gene, the 5 of diamonds, that will give it this plant resistance. So one way we could get that 5 of diamonds in there is to do what's called hybridization or crossing. And so we're going to cross the red crop with the blue relative, and we've introduced that 5 of diamonds, or that gene, but we've mixed up the genetics greatly.
Yeah, we've added a whole lot of other things as well.
Exactly, and we're going to be able to get rid of most of those through conventional breeding, but not all of them. So conventional breeding is a way to actually cause a fair amount of change in the genetics of the crop. So in contrast, let's take this situation where we have the crop that we're very interested in that's still susceptible. We have this wild relative which has that one gene that we're interested in. We don't care about the rest. So with genetic engineering, we simply take that gene in the laboratory, and instead of mixing in everything together, we put that one gene into the crop. And so we both forms of breeding are useful. It's still useful to do hybridization like we see here. But if we want a more precise way to introduce a gene, then genetic engineering is the way to go, because we've only introduced one gene through this process.
And we've solved the problem of the disease resistance.
Exactly.
And so tell me about time frame, okay? So this is more precise, but is this more timely?
Yeah, actually, no, it takes less time typically to do what you saw with genetic engineering. So with hybridization, this great mixture of genes is going to need to be reduced, right, to get back to a mostly red crop. And that process is called backcrossing, and that can take 5 years, it could take 10 years, 20 years, maybe not really be possible with some crops like banana. Whereas what we did with genetic engineering, once you know the gene of interest, once you've identified that gene through laboratory research, then placing it into the crop may be 6 months or a year. You know, it may not take very long at all.
So this speeds up the process quite a bit.
It speeds it up and it makes it more precise.
Okay, so if people are still wanting to know more information, does the University of Kentucky have that information?
Well, yeah, actually, the University of Kentucky, being science-based, we have a lot of good scientific information on genetic engineering. It's the strengths and the weaknesses, so we cover the waterfront. And of course, your office, you and your office are a great source of probably more than most people could stand to read. So, big piles.
More than you want to know. So I appreciate you being here with us today. Make sure to tune in for the next couple days. Paul's going to be with us explaining more about GMOs. Thanks for watching, and we hope you have a great day.
Sure.
Wow.
absolutely.
Okay, and so one of those is, why do we use GMOs? Why are they beneficial in our production system?
Right. So we did that little demonstration of conventional breeding and genetic engineering, or GMOs, and you know, both are useful. But genetic engineering is going to be useful when there's a particular gene that you want to introduce that you can't do by conventional breeding, and so there are some examples that are widely used. First and most commonly is herbicide tolerance. So many of your viewers have heard of Roundup herbicide or weed killer, sometimes called glyphosate, which refers to the active ingredient. And normally that would kill corn and soybeans and cotton and so on. But if you introduce a single gene into that particular gene into those crops, then they become tolerant to the Roundup herbicide. And so farmers could go out and spray and get very good, very effective and inexpensive weed control with that genetically engineered trait. Of course, there's been problems with that, of course, with the selection of weeds that resist Roundup, but that's the nature of the current state of affairs. Another trait that's been widely used throughout the world, not just here in the United States, is insect resistance to certain types of insects. And that insect resistance is commonly called Bt, referring to the bacterium that was the donor of the gene. And that resistance, for example, makes Bt resistance makes corn resistant to European corn borer, for example. And that has been remarkably successful in reducing insecticide use on crops throughout the world. It's really been a great benefit in that way. So those are some of the things that sort of are common, but there are other applications as well.
Absolutely. And so usually a GMO is created because there's a particular problem that we're trying to solve.
Yes. Absolutely. So for example, now there are many genetically engineered traits that are sitting in the scientific literature. They're not being commercialized yet. Someday I hope they are, because they're really good. For example, I'm a plant pathologist. I study plant disease. And I know that a lot of chemical is used to control plant diseases. Growers want alternatives. They don't want to spray chemicals. So genetic engineering or conventional breeding can be ways to solve disease problems. However we get there is good. Conventional breeding sometimes gives us disease resistance that's adequate, sometimes not. And when it doesn't, those are the times when genetic engineering can be so powerful and give growers ways to reduce their pesticide use.
Absolutely. Now, you know, there's been some discussion about GMOs, but this is not a new technology. No,
it's been used for commercialized crops for over 2 decades. There are some new techniques that are worth talking about. Gene editing is probably the way it's most commonly known, or CRISPR. Those are remarkably precise tools for genetic engineering and are really changing the world of biology, not just crops.
I was about to say, it has a scope or a reach way beyond agriculture.
Absolutely,
though.
yeah.
CRISPR does.
CRISPR does. Therapeutics, they're going to be cancer therapeutics that we expect as a result of CRISPR technologies. We're really actually in the beginning of a revolution in biology. And it doesn't feel like it because we're at the beginning, but we're actually at the beginning of a revolution in biology because of CRISPR, the latest techniques for genetic engineering.
Yeah, and they can probably find more information about all the applications of CRISPR. But let's talk just a little bit. Some people are like, okay, I want to know more information. And I know that there is a publication that's available on the university's website,
that's
PPA
right.
47.
PPA 47, yeah. Yeah, so I always, as you know, I always try to make sure that the county extension agents have quite a few things available to them at their fingertips. And there's a publication they can get online. PPA 47 is the code number, and they could put in my last name, Vincelli, and they should hit it pretty easily. Or they can contact their county extension office and get a copy as well.
Absolutely. Addressing questions people might have, and I think probably the most common question I get asked by consumers is it safe?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. That's the most common question I get. There are other issues that come up, but that is probably the most important. And, you know, understandably so. We all want to know that our food is safe. And scientists want to know that our food is safe. So So I can assure you, I think we're somewhere close to 1,000 research papers on the safety issues relating to genetically engineered crops. So there is a huge amount of science, really, that supports and supports the issue of safety. And in fact, the way that you can, if you study this stuff carefully, you find that major scientific organizations like our National Academy of Sciences says that genetically engineered foods are as safe as conventional foods. And I've studied this stuff as deeply as I can because I want to be confident in what I tell the people of Kentucky.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I see exactly where they're coming from. There's no new risk introduced from genetic engineering that wouldn't already be there in our foods as they are.
And and I agree. But then they ask, well, why will the European Union not let GMOs be in their country?
And it's a great question. I've had friends ask me that. Why is it so different in Europe? And so it's important for viewers to understand that it's the publics of the various Western European countries that are hesitant to consume genetically engineered foods. It's the publics. But if you look at what their scientists say and what their scientists do, they understand genetically engineered crops to be as safe as conventional foods, just like our scientists in the United States, just like Australian scientists or anywhere, any major society in the world. So, but of course in Europe they're not going to force genetically engineered crops on their peoples, but their scientists understand it no differently than we do.
Okay, and I think those are very reputable because a lot of times if you'll get on the internet and you'll start looking and researching, there's a lot of spin going on out there.
Yeah, if you do an internet search and you put in the letters GMO, easily the first top 20 hits are advocacy organizations. And while they may have the best of intentions, very often it's easy to find errors in what's being promoted. So what does a scientist do? A scientist looks to, in addition to the peer-reviewed research, we look to the really high-quality, conservative thinkers in science who are very evidence-based, and where you can find these. The National Academy of Sciences, the European Academy of Sciences, and other organizations. And you find that, that they've done the hard work for us, and they've sorted through and done the research, and they find these foods there's no new risk. These foods are as safe as anything else.
And one of the follow-up questions that I get sometimes is, but GMO, I can't get away from it. I'm forced to eat it because it's all in my grocery store. But the actuality is there's a limited number of GMO crops.
Yes, that's right. I think it's about 9. Some of the major crops are, corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, alfalfa. So there's a number of major agronomic crops that can be both GMO and non-GMO, but heavily GMO in the case of some of these. But almost every fruit and vegetable is non-GMO already. No one's commercialized a genetically engineered crop of, say, carrots or celery or salad. So there's a lot of things may have a non-GMO label. Well, there is no GMO. Cauliflower. So.
Yeah, doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. No one's commercialized it.
Yeah, but it is marketing because a consumer might feel safer when they're buying that, but just to know the facts, there's only a limited number that we eat.
All right, that's right. And one of the things that we did that little demonstration where with hybridization, we mixed all those genes together. With genetic engineering, we just put in one gene, and that helps us understand we're actually doing less to the plant through genetic engineering than we are with conventional breeding.
And isn't it great that science, we can choose one individual thing and insert it very precisely into a plant and solve a lot of problems.
Pretty amazing.
So appreciate the work that you've done. If you have questions, make sure to contact us. Thanks for watching and have a great day.
If you have questions about today's topics, please call the Warren County Extension Office at the number on your screen. Thanks for watching and have a great day.